Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's one of the NFL's best rivalries when the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Baltimore Ravens. Tune in early for pregame coverage with TNF Tonight, live from Baltimore. It's the Bengals and the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial and you can cancel at any time. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Hey, this is Peter Schrager from the podcast The Season with Peter Schrager, and it is football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver you foam fingers? No. Chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. And there you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Product availability may vary by region. See the app for details.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, November 15th on the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz and Jason Moore.
What's up, boys? Got a big trade week coming up here for Dynasty Leagues, making a push to the playoffs. Are you fellas playoff bound in your leagues?
Oh, playoff bound. I'm bye-week bound, brother.
Oh,
yes. No, we are. Yeah, I'm on the way. Although in our main Dynasty league, I was 8-1, just dominant team, and I had a bunch of bye weeks. I had a lot of guys on bye. Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith, that stack. I had just a handful of players that I had to swap in, but it was okay because I was playing the hapless 1-8 team. Just every Dynasty league has the team that is in the process of rebuilding down to the nubs, where you're playing nobodies, and so that was my matchup, so it was fine. But I lost. I lost this week. My super team got trounced by the worst team in the league, so that's fun. But no, Dynasty leagues are going good. Quick debate time, because we are doing a Dynasty show, and we're talking about trade for and trade away targets today. What is your guys' opinion on whether or not Dynasty leagues should have a trade deadline? Should be late, early, no trade deadline? You could trade all the way through the playoffs and the offseason every second. Where do you guys stand on that? Because I've seen some hot debates on that topic.
Yeah, I'll just say that the overarching idea that I think people try to say in fantasy is, oh, well, there's a trade deadline in the NFL. We need to do it. You could do whatever you want. Okay, so let me just say, do whatever you want with your league. It can work. I do like the leagues that I'm in that have a strict deadline, which is the end of this week, and then I have one that has a week later. So I personally think it's worked out really well. It's created this buying window, this frenzy. And so personally, in my opinion, I like the way that we have it set up, that it's this week or next week, depending on your league.
Yeah, I also am in favor of having them. I have a couple leagues that I play in. I have both situations where there's no deadline at all. There's one where it's this week, just like the redraft calendar kind of is for most leagues. And then there's one where it's the week before playoffs. So you extend the window a little bit. But I think the deadline, whenever it is for your league, is good for the league because it incentivizes teams to get a deal done by a certain date. Whereas like you can hem and haw back and forth for a couple weeks and then you both get busy or you both move on and like doesn't get done. That's not fun in Dynasty and not fun for your league. So when you have that deadline, it also kind of helps you plan ahead, obviously, for the playoffs, or you can really take advantage if you are a rebuilding team to get some of these vets off your roster, where literally in 6-7 weeks, like their value will change a ton. usually in a negative way. So like those guys you can capitalize on. So I like having a deadline. I think it helps create more league activity.
Yeah, I'm curious. You say you play in a couple leagues that have no deadline, right? Like you could trade at any time. I have never played in one of those leagues, but I imagine, like, I can't fathom a situation where you're in a championship game. Like I made it to the title, and now I'm gonna go try to buy everything I can this week. Trade for matchups and go all out to win a title. Or my opponent doing that, or just the ability to do that. It seems wildly irresponsible for a league. But I guess my question to you is, does that happen then? Like, when you get to championship week in those leagues without a trade deadline, are those two teams like going hard in the paint after trades to win that week?
Not really. Not as much as you would expect. Because, there's still some players that teams are going to say, look, like, I know what you're trying to do. Give me that extra, second on top of what you're trying to do, or just try to get a little extra piece in the trade. So it doesn't actually get done quite as much as you would think. The area that I think I don't like this situation playing out is like, you go on a 2 or 3 week run in the playoffs, whatever it is for your league, and you get to the championship week and you lose a starter, you lose a stud. Like, that's part of the game. That happens, right? But like in this situation where there is no deadline, you can just say, look, I have a week to figure it out, and I'm going to go trade for someone to get in my lineup for this week. And feels like an unfair advantage, although if it's the same for everyone in your league, I guess anyone could do it. But injuries are part of the game, suspensions, whatever, like that's kind of the lay of the land. So I don't like it for that reason, but no, there's not as much as you would think like the week of the championship.
The idea of just there's chaos, and we talk about it all the time, that there are nasty boys that emerge during the fantasy playoffs. That's part of what I love about Dynasty, is that you do have to pivot. So I like having a trade deadline. And let's be honest, like the trade deadline then opens up very quickly right after that in Dynasty leagues, where you can trade all the time and your picks only get more valuable as we turn the calendar and go to 2024. You get to February, March, April, like those picks only increase. So I feel like people aren't really missing out that much because Dynasty season always lasts. So I don't know. Does that feel like I'm a fun sucker there?
No, not at all. Feels like you're a smart, intelligent man.
You know what? I will take that. I will take that information.
I said feels like you're a smart, intelligent man. I did not say you are. How dare you?
To be very clear on this.
It's a giant facade that I know anything about anything. I mean, fantasy football, all of us, but spreadsheets, all that stuff. Like I'm doing really good, faking people out over these years, thinking that I'm semi-smart. Mm-hmm. So we are glad you're with us. This episode, as we mentioned, is a Trade-apalooza. We'll be talking about trade for, trade away, and even some questions from Discord and from the Foot Clan that we will discuss. If you want to get all of our tools, so some of the things that we'll be bringing up on this show is strength of schedule, looking ahead to matchups. You can get that at jointhefoot.com if you want to be a member of the Foot Clan. Interact with us all the time. I was getting some questions from our Dynasty Trade Advice channel, which is maybe the most popular channel right now. And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, the largest Discord for fantasy football on the planet?
We are definitely the largest, most active one. I think there's a total count. We're closing the gap right now. We're either the biggest or the second biggest, but we're certainly the most active.
Yeah, and these are people that want to talk trades, and so you will get your question answered. So go to jointhefoot.com if you want to be a part of that. My quick question for us is maybe a selfish emotional exercise. Maybe it's a little bit of therapy. But which player for you is giving you the biggest roller coaster moment for you in Dynasty? Meaning there are so many ebbs and flows this season that it is driving you bonkers. And Betz, your answer, Jason easily could have answered this, but you were in the dock first.
That's 100% what it was. This would have been my answer, but you got the floor, Betz.
I mean, there's not much to say. Everyone that has had this player feels what I'm going to say about Gabe Davis. And it goes all the way back to last year when you were buying into a player attached to Josh Allen who had a massive opportunity to step forward into the wide receiver 2 role across from Stephon Diggs. And it just hasn't happened. But at the same time, it sort of has happened, right? Like you see these games where Gabe Davis pops up as like the first read in the offense, the second read at worst, right? There's games where he comes out and he has these 8, 9, 12 target games. And then all of a sudden the next week, it's 3 targets, it's 4 targets. You just can't even count on him ever in your lineup. You don't know what you're getting, and it's been so frustrating for the better part of a year and a half now at this point. His consistency rating in our database is, as you would guess, an F, meaning you can't rely on this player.
For fantastic.
Yeah, you can't rely on this player. But what's so scary about him is when you bench him, and you guys talked about this last week on the main show, is when he goes off. And so it's just this conundrum of this guy that you hope could be something. You don't really know what he is, and he's kind of this just facade in your lineup because you don't know what he is. I also will mention, just from a dynasty standpoint, like I don't know what to think of Gabe Davis. He is going to be an undrafted a free agent, excuse me, not undrafted, a free agent in 2024 coming up. So there's no real attachment.
This offseason, or he's under contract in 24?
This offseason. He's in his final year of his deal.
Wow.
So I'm so stuck on Gabe Davis. I've been in, I've been out. I don't know what to do.
I don't think I could buy him right now. I mean, I'm a Josh Allen manager, and it's tempting to go after that stack, but it's also just really tempting to say, like, I could get nothing. So when Dalton Kincaid looks like he's the second read in that offense right now. So yeah, Jason, I know he's driving you insane. Hopefully you bench him this next week.
I do have him benched this next week. I'm very happy to report that finally, for the first time all season in my league of record, I have gotten healthy enough where I can finally put Gabe Davis on my bench. It's very exciting for me. My player who's driven me up and down on a roller coaster of questionable thoughts, this hasn't been like as emotional as Gabe Davis driving me insane. This is just me going so far from one side to the other in this single season, and then back and forth on the value of this player in Dynasty. And this season is his entire career so far. It's Zach Charbonnet. Going into the NFL draft, Zach Charbonnet was my running back 2 ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. I know that was spicy in some circles. I just thought the talent, the body, the size, the pass catching, the pile pushing, the goal line opportunities.
Big body back.
Big body back. If a team were to invest heavily in him, and he was projected to go in like the second round, if a team were to invest heavily in him and create in him a workhorse, he would have been unbelievably great for fantasy football. That's why I loved him. And then he was drafted in the second round with great draft capital by the Seattle Seahawks. We know the story. And Ken Walker is there, and Pete Carroll playing his games with all his running backs and all this. So, that obviously dropped him down quite a bit for me. After the draft, it was like, well, his opportunity isn't going to be there. At best, he's a 50-50 player with Ken Walker. At worst, he's just the backup. We've seen the Seattle Seahawks do this before. They spent a first-round draft pick on Rashad Penny back in the day, who was a talented, great player. And then they said, hey, Chris Carson, who was already on the team, you're the dude. And this is not injury, okay? I know we want to say Rashad Penny's career was completely and utterly derailed by injury. Sure, there's truth to that. But his rookie season, it wasn't injury. It wasn't that he was injured. His rookie season, he just flat out was the backup to Chris Carson, despite the first-round draft capital. And I believe that had those two players both stayed healthy and active for the Seahawks, that was what they wanted. They, regardless of spending the first-round pick, they liked Chris Carson. They liked what he presented their team, and they spent high draft capital on the backup running back. And so now, as the season has gone and unfolded, I think about 4 or 5 weeks into the season, when it was the Ken Walker show, and he was dominating, and Charbonnet was, clearly and utterly the backup. It was like, well, I genuinely thought Charbonnet's career's over. Like, for fantasy purposes. For fantasy purposes, he's never going to, he's an insurance back, where if Ken Walker gets injured, now all of a sudden you've got a fantasy asset. But until that happens, you do not get fantasy production out of this player, no matter how good he is and how much draft capital there was. So in week 4 or 5, I was like, man, do you just trade him for anything you can get? Trade on the hope and the high of the draft capital and the rookie pick that was spent on him? Now we've seen him over the last couple weeks. Once he got back from his injury, he's playing the majority of snaps. He's playing almost all of the third down role, which, Kyle, I know you're a huge advocate of this. The third down role in the NFL is not very important. It's really not. Case in point, Zach Charbonnet has played all the third down role, and it's resulted in diddly squat. The early down snap percentages still go to Kenneth Walker. First and second down, that's really where fantasy points are scored, far more than third down. Yes, a reception is worth more, but players get receptions on first and second down too. It's not just third down. A lot of times third down is the 3rd and 1. It's a goal line type of play. So I don't know what to do with Zach Charbonnet. I don't even know my belief going forward on the fantasy value. Will he be relevant without an injury to Ken Walker? Right now, if I had to put a dollar bet on it, I would say no. I don't think he's ever going to be relevant unless Kenneth Walker gets injured. And that sucks for a guy that I genuinely think is extremely talented and should Ken Walker get injured, Charbonnet is going to be a top 10 back.
Yes.
I'm so confident of that.
Yeah, I thought a couple of weeks ago that he was a great buy low candidate to be able to say, hey, you know what, because he's, like you said, he's more than just give me 10 touches. Like, he has the upside of being a top 5 running back if Walker's out of the way, but I just didn't know what I was going to get, and I didn't want to give it up because he's still seen as, he was a first-round rookie pick this past year, borderline, and I think that's still what you kind of have to give up. Like, the manager that took him is willing to probably hold him. So would you rather have Zach Charbonnet or a late first in 2024?
I think I'd rather have the first.
I think so too. And so I'm probably just holding, because if you're that manager that's contending, let's say, you end up being the, 10th or 11th pick or whatever, you're trading that pick in hopes that this guy helps you for this year, and there's zero guarantees apart from an injury that's going to happen. So yeah, I totally agree. Over the last 3 weeks, this is crazy. Charbonnet has took all but one third down snap for the team, and like Jason mentioned, there's no fantasy points that have mattered at all from him. So keep that in mind. It's a player that we still believe in talent-wise, and he's been efficient when he's gotten some touches, but if Walker's going to get all the first and second down, that's all that matters. I am going crazy with this player, and I blasted in our Slack channel, and I need some help, because Lamar Jackson might be the most frustrating player to have at quarterback, because you could get 50 points. You could also get 11 points, which is crazy that in any given week, this team could put up 30 plus points, which is what they've done. And you have no idea if it's just going to be 3 rushing touchdowns and you're done. So remember last year, he started off on fire. Mm-hmm. Like, he had a couple of quarterback ones. Since then, since week 4 of last year, guys, he's scored 20 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games just twice. Like, you're not getting back-to-back good performances at all. And with a quarterback that's expensive in Dynasty, in a Superflex league, like 20 points is just a given. Like, you need to get 20 points from, all these players that you're seeing as a QB1. And I looked at what's different this year. Lamar's completing 70% of his passes. That's the highest of his career, but the lowest ADOT of his career. Like, that's what's driving us crazy about Zay Flowers too, right? Just these little dink and dunks. They don't matter. We brought this point up. I remember Jason bringing it up too. Like, there was a news story saying Lamar wouldn't run as much this year, but based on the offense, they're going to scramble way more, and scrambles are way more valuable. And he's scrambling at the highest rate of his career. It's awesome, but they're not giving him design runs. So it's this weird thing where he's completing more passes, but they're short. He's scrambling more, but not overall running more. And then you get these weird outcomes. So
it's all just one thing, man. It's one thing and one thing alone. It's touchdowns. That's it. Because Lamar has played very good all year. He's got a consistency rating over the last 17 games of a D. He has been bad for fantasy as far as helping you win on a consistent basis. All those games, I mean, there might be 1 or 2 poorly played games in there, but those 17 games, he's been good. The team has been good. The team is scoring enough and doing well enough in the vast majority of them. It's just a matter of where do the touchdowns come from? And right now they're so good at rushing touchdowns in. It used to be the rushing touchdowns were Lamar. Now it's Gus Bus. It's Keaton Mitchell. Justice Hill has had multiple. He's had a game with multiple rushing touchdowns. Like, they're just really frustrating for fantasy. And so what do you do with a guy where you go, well, I know he's good. I know Lamar's good. It's not a Lamar problem. But he isn't scoring consistent fantasy. And I believe the answer is you should trade super high on him. He's still Lamar Jackson. He's still literally the odds-on favorite for MVP this year, or at least he was before this last week. I don't know if that changed with their loss, but you can get a lot for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a name that has extreme recognition in fantasy circles, and if you haven't had Lamar, you don't realize the experience and the letdown. And you're still riding high on that. What was that, like 2018? When was his
2019?
2019, yeah.
That's a long time ago, man.
So let me ask this question, Betz. You can, because Lamar's been one of my favorite players this year. We were in Lamar in a lot of different formats, especially best ball. But like, I hate the ebbs and flows so much. I hate that I'm watching this game and I'm pointing it out to my wife and I'm saying, see this player right here? He could literally break the game, or he's going to throw an interception. And of course he did, or fumble. That's just Lamar. So would you rather have Lamar in a super flex or in a dynasty league, or Justin Herbert plus a little something more?
Oh, that's interesting. It probably depends on what the plus is, but I mean, I'm biased. I'm a huge Justin Herbert guy, so I think I would take the Justin Herbert side if it's something somewhat meaningful on the plus side.
It just feels like a smoother ride. And I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm just saying emotionally, I'm showing you guys the fantasy points. I have a chart right here. That is a literal roller coaster right there over the last 2 years. So it's
his touchdown rate is wild. You mentioned that historic season when he had the 9% touchdown rate. He's been 6.9, 4.2, 5.2. I do think we're going to see some regression back to his average over the next several games. He's currently at 3.6. That's going to be, right now, it's supposed to be the lowest of his career, not including his rookie season when he didn't play a full year. So if that swings back, I think you'll feel a little better about Lamar. But like you said, Jason, they're just so good at running the football that I'm not sure. And this week, on Thursday, they get a matchup against a Bengals team that can't stop anyone against the run. So I don't know. I get it. I get the frustration. But there are some signs that say maybe it won't be this way, for the rest of the season or obviously moving forward. My
blood pressure is up. I can tell, since having this conversation and talking him out. But I'll figure it out. What
would you do, Kyle, before I move on? Would you take the Herbert plus side? Lamar? That's
what I want to do, because I just want to rid myself of feeling this every single week. At least you can look at certain players. If Sam Howell busts, you're like, I expect Sam Howell to bust. But with Lamar, you're just expecting greatness. And you don't get it as much as you want. So
yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll jump into some trades.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's a clash in the AFC North when the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Baltimore Ravens. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game. Live from Baltimore, it's the Bengals and the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
You need a vehicle that can meet your family's needs, and Toyota has you covered. Introducing the first ever Grand Highlander, a midsize SUV with the ideal combination of space, performance, style, and advanced tech. The roomy Grand Highlander never makes you choose between passengers and cargo. You can fit both with ease. With 3 spacious rows and available seating for up to 8, and legroom that makes even long trips comfortable. With Grand Highlander's available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain unlimited and platinum trims, you can be confident you have the power, acceleration, and efficiency needed for almost any adventure your family can cook up. And you'll get where you're going in style with a modern, spacious cabin that's perfect for both playdates and date nights. Impressive tech upgrades upgrades take the new Grand Highlander to the next level, including a standard digital key, an available panoramic view mirror, and a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen. Don't just live life grander in the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander.
All right, we're going to jump into some trades. We'll highlight a couple of different players that fit the trade for and the trade away, so let's do it.
Let's talk trades.
So I called this a trade-apalooza, and I actually don't really know what a palooza is. Do you guys know?
I'm on it.
It feels like
Google
a term that we're supposed to know, or like we say when something's big or an extravaganza, but I don't know.
Well, palooza is a portion of the word Lollapalooza, which is a late 19th century term defined as an extraordinary or unusual thing, person, or event, an exceptional example or instance.
Okay.
There you go.
That's a fun word to be able to say. I'm extending this idea of a trade show, and we're making it a palooza.
An extraordinary event.
This is pretty extraordinary. So these are trade for candidates. We're going to each give three. Last year, I want to give you some examples. If you traded for James Conner, like I did, okay? I'm just throwing this out there. Traded for James Conner. He was the RB6 from this point forward. It was one of the best trades I've ever made in my life. Devin Duvernay in a second for a hurt James Conner.
Wow. That is a pretty darn good trade.
And then George Kittle. If you traded for Kittle, which I get, it's the up and down as well. He's definitely the roller coaster player. With Brock Purdy down the stretch, I didn't trade for him, but I had a friend that said he won me my championship because he got those monster games with Purdy. So these obviously will all hit. These will be the exact players that people need in Dynasty. Betz, start us off.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat here and just say there's two options. Because you can't trade for Jackson Smith-Njigba because he's so valuable in Dynasty, but you can trade for Tyler Lockett and or DK Metcalf. And really, I just want to buy into the Seattle passing game. We finally saw Geno get back on track last week, and yes, it was against Washington as everyone gets there. But the Seattle wide receivers have the second easiest schedule-adjusted fantasy points against schedule moving forward, and the easiest on our site looking at just the playoff weeks. They get San Francisco, Philly, and Tennessee in weeks 15, 16, 17. And a lot of these teams that they're going to be playing, I think we're going to see decent game environments with higher totals, lots of passing. They take on the Rams, the Niners twice, Dallas, like I said, the Eagles, and the Titans who you have to throw on. So on paper, it looks like Seattle's going to be throwing the ball more moving forward. They're already ninth in pass rate over expectation. But the reason it has been so frustrating for guys like Metcalf specifically, and to some extent, Tyler Lockett, is because Geno Smith's touchdown rate is down compared to what it was last year. Going back to his Jets days, which I kind of laughed, reminding myself of like Geno Smith's career, but going back to his Jets days, he was a 4.1% touchdown rate type of guy. Last season in Seattle, 5.2. This year, he's all the way down at 3.7. So if we get the passing volume to stay the same, or perhaps with these game environments increase, and the touchdown rate comes up a little bit, you should see more production from the wide receivers as a whole. And the nice thing about it is you know where the ball is going with the Seattle passing attack, right? They are fourth in the NFL, Seattle is, in target rate to the wide receiver position. So they're behind the Rams, the Bengals, the Dolphins, and then it's Seattle. So the ball is going to these guys. I think you can get Lockett for a pretty reasonable, cheap price. People know he's older. People know JSN's there. And Metcalf is a guy that really, he's like the poster boy for underperforming in fantasy at wide receiver. He is the wide receiver 17 in expected fantasy points this year. He's the wide receiver 37 overall currently. He just needs touchdowns, and I think they're coming in the back half of the year. So what are your guys' thoughts on the Seattle passing game?
I really, really like this call for two kind of opposite reasons. If you're trading for Lockett, you need to be trading cheap because he's an old man where people are trying to get something for him, especially if he's on a team that's not headed towards the championship. Like, go kick the tires because I think this year he'll be great. I'll bet he's fine next year too. Metcalf is a long-term, very good dynasty option. Metcalf, I believe the reason he's underperforming right now this year is simply that he's injured. He doesn't look the same to me. First of all, he looks too big. I was talking about this in the studio. Like, I don't know what's going on, but he looks so big and lumbering for what he usually looks like. And obviously, I mean, he missed a game with injury. He's been on the injury report every single week. I don't think he's at full strength. And he is a young stud who we know is a great dominant wide receiver in the NFL. So if he is struggling right now, yeah, that's the time to take advantage of, of the player. You can make the argument, oh, JSN's in town and, he's the future and Metcalf is underperforming. It seemed like a year ago, even being able to trade for DK Metcalf in Dynasty would have been too difficult, cost way too much to be able to acquire. So I like both those calls.
I am putting in an offer right now in a Dynasty league involving DK Metcalf and another player that I will be talking about in a second. So
is this a league I'm in with you, Kyle?
Sometimes I accept that you're in the league. Some days I don't. So,
but I'm saying, are you talking about Dino Jr. right now?
You bet I am. All right.
Okay.
You're up,
I'm
Jason.
I need to go trade for DK Metcalf real quick.
You need to bring up your player.
All right. I'll bring up my player. My player is Lions running back. No, not Jahmyr Gibbs. It's Lions running back David Montgomery. That's the player I think Dynasty managers should be trading for. Dynasty running backs are hard to come by. They expire so quickly. They don't get second contracts so regularly. It's very, very difficult to think I've got multiple years from this running back unless they're a rookie. If they're on their rookie contract, like Jahmyr Gibbs, you draft them, and you've got Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne, who are very, very young players who you think, okay, I've got a good dynasty asset. I drafted Breece Hall last year. Outside of the super young guys, everybody seems like a worthless expiring asset. And right now, with Montgomery, I realize he had a big run this last week, but it's Jahmyr Gibbs' season. The fire has been stoked for Jahmyr Gibbs. Everyone's excited about it. They're waiting for the takeover. And I don't think people are really excited in Dynasty the way they should be for David Montgomery. David Montgomery is an older back, but he just signed a brand new contract. He is 100% under contract this year, 100% under contract next year where they're not going to be able to get out of it. Technically, they could get out of it before that third year, but the contract, when you look at it, it doesn't save them that much money to get out of it. It's a pretty good team-friendly deal at that point 3 years from now, and he's not going to be as old as you think that entire time. This is a team that is great at running the ball, wants to establish it, has a great offensive line, a high-scoring offense. I think you've got 3 solid years of a really important fantasy asset in David Montgomery, and people aren't valuing him that way because of Jahmyr Gibbs. They can both be really good. They can both be super good for fantasy, but only one is an extremely high-value target, and the other is kind of like, yeah, but he's David Montgomery. So to me, I was able to trade for him in a keeper league this year. I did that because I believe what I'm saying, and I would kick the tires on what is the price in your dynasty leagues.
I think that it would cost you, just because of what he's done this year, a first plus a young piece.
Okay, so we actually I forgot in a champ league. I mean, that's a couple years from now. Right now we're champ 3-time champion. Mike and I tried to trade for David Montgomery, and we were very, very, very close to a deal. In fact, had that team not won, had they lost, we basically had a deal together, and it was our first round pick plus it was a younger wide receiver who I don't think will develop into anything, but could. Like it's what he said is he wanted a first plus hope, and so that was kind of the deal we came up with. But now it looks like his team is headed towards the playoffs. I don't think he wants to move on, but yeah, that's about what it costs. And if you're a good team, which we've got a good roster, we were happy to send our first round pick next year plus a little bit more for David Montgomery.
Yeah,
love it.
I think it makes sense. He fits his team's identity. they can both coexist. We saw that last week, where both players were awesome for fantasy. It can work. I will throw out a running back that is not nearly as expensive as the other two players, and you might only look at him as a 1-year rental, but I think there could be a little bit more. It's Jerome Ford, running back of the Cleveland Browns. His second year in the league. He was a 5th-round draft pick. The last 2 weeks since he's returned, he was kind of banged up, but last 2 weeks, 64% of the snaps, and he's seen 33% of the team's targets and rush attempts. On our website, we call that our workhorse percentage. Anything above 30 is insane. So he's like the main guy. I know Kareem Hunt is getting some touches, but Jerome Ford has been a much better runner this year than people give him credit. And the rest of the season, Cleveland has one of the best schedules coming up. They're running the ball at the 3rd highest rush rate. And I don't think it'll cost you that much on the stretch run to get a player like Jerome Ford, which I think he's a solid RB2 rest of season. He's going to give you some weeks where he's top 15, top 12. I think he's great. And I think it'll cost you, I don't know, a late second?
Yeah, I don't think it'll cost much. It depends on whether or not the team that has him whether they need him or not.
Right.
But I like the idea of taking on Jerome Ford, and the fact that the second surgery is coming up for Chubb. There was some positive news right after originally the Chubb injury was like horrific, like, oh my gosh, this is look away, and then it was like, oh, it's pretty positive, it's not multi-ligament. So then everything went away, but then it was like, no. It was they got in there and they were like, yeah, this is messed up. This knee's messed up. We're gonna have to do another one. So there's no guarantee that Chubb comes back to his former self ever.
Yeah,
that is unfortunate as far as the Chubb thing goes. The other thing working in Jerome Ford's favor, if you're thinking about not just this year, but like, could I get a guy that potentially is an RB2 next year, is that when you look at their roster currently at the players that are signed, they've got Nick Chubb for 1 more year, but of course we already talked about the injury. Then it is Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong, and that's it. So if they continue to not have the money to spend up on a running back, which thanks to Deshaun Watson they don't, and or can't afford to spend high-ish draft capital on a guy, you could see a scenario where maybe Chubb comes back as like a couple touches a game sort of guy, but like Jerome Ford is the lead back. That's in the range of outcomes for sure. So I like that as a guy that right now people are like, he's fine. Like, doesn't scream upside. He's not this, sexy name, but like he could be an RB2 for you next year as well. So you're kind of getting a double dip here, which I really like.
Do you feel like you could trade a young wide receiver that's kind of tantalizing that could not pan out, like a Marvin Mims, which hasn't done a ton, but I think most people are excited of what he could be and the potential? Would you trade Marvin Mims for Jerome Ford?
I would not.
I don't think I would. I would still hold out for Marvin Mims, play the long game.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to find the wide receiver to mix in that's like, okay, they've done enough. Like I tried with Khalil Shakir. That wasn't enough. There's somewhere between those two that I think could work. So he's just a name
Jameson
that
Williams.
Imagine
we talked
having
about him last week.
Imagine having him on your roster though.
Could be me. Could be me.
I just got an offer from somebody that like had this package and they said, hey, what if I put Jameson Williams in? I go, no, take him out. I will feel way better.
No, that makes it worse.
It 20 times worse. All right, let's go through some trade away candidates. This is tough because we're not saying this player is going to stink. We're not saying this player is worthless or will have no value. Part of this is like the guessing game of, are you getting out at the right time? So I look back at last year, DeAndre Hopkins was still a Cardinal and he was still really good. His target share was really good. But if you could squeeze out some elite value before, then you are probably doing great because the sun is kind of set on DeAndre Hopkins and his dynasty value. Dameon Pierce, we've talked about him last couple of weeks. If you could have sold then and said, hey, I don't think he's the guy. Or Dalvin Cook was a player last year that if you sold, you felt great. I am left holding the bag in a league because I needed him at the time, and now it's just sitting on my roster. So it's like
it's
trading
crazy.
away.
It's crazy how quick those running backs can just disappear. Dalvin Cook was great last year. He was really good for fantasy. So important. Huge breakaway runs. Paid a lot of money even this year. Poof. Gone. Vanished. He's like, you just drop him. I mean, don't really, but like you could.
Do you guys know what Dalvin Cook finished in half-point leagues last year?
It's got to be top 10 at least.
He was the
I was gonna
RB10.
say RB8.
Okay.
RB10.
Wow.
Did it feel like that, though?
No. I mean, I think there was a lot of disappointment with Dalvin Cook, but he had some big plays last year. I mean, last year, how many games did he play? Did he play the whole season?
He technically played the whole season, but it was a rough ride.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are just examples of players that can just evaporate. So you want to be on the right side. So part of this is a guessing game. Betz, hit us with one first.
Yeah, this one is kind of wild because when you look back to the start of the season where he was as far as the training camp hype and the week 1 performance, you thought, oh my gosh, like Calvin Ridley is still Calvin Ridley. But it turns out he's not Calvin Ridley any longer. And there's some concerning underlying metrics that say he's not the same player he used to be, which no one was expecting that, but I think we were at least hoping he'd be a wide receiver 2, at worst a flex play every week. He's almost 29 years old. He's about to be a free agent. And now, right now, among the pass catchers, he's 3rd in targets per game, and that's been without Zay Jones in the lineup. And I know that right now there's some legal stuff going on with Zay Jones, but if Zay Jones comes back from that and or injury, it adds another piece to this offense that you're concerned about the target volume for Calvin Ridley. And when you look at the efficiency stuff, his yards per route run is not great. He's about middle of the pack among wide receivers that are qualified. He's only being targeted on 19% of his routes. He's not getting open, according to ESPN's open score, which is kind of this player tracking metric. But like when you think about Calvin Ridley, that was his thing, was he was an elite route runner who could get open and create separation. He is not doing that anymore, and now he is at the tail end of his career. So I think it's okay to be out and get out before it's too late. And I feel like when we look at this offseason, a lot of the talk around Calvin Ridley is going to be what happens over the next 4, 5, 6 weeks here to close out the year, and then where he goes in free agency and whether or not he goes back to Jacksonville. But I just think the metrics are kind of telling us he's not the player he was, and he may never be anything close to it again. And so I'm willing to get out, even if I take a cheaper, trade to get out from underneath Calvin Ridley before it's too late.
The question, this is one of the questions that we got, was, so if I were to sell him or should I wait? You're saying I should sell him right now and get whatever I can, like a early second.
I would 100% try to get an early second. I actually put that out on Twitter today to see what the sentiment was among people. About 10% of folks said a late first, about 30% said early second, and about 60% of people said a mid second. So early to mid second seems like the market for right now for Calvin Ridley. I think that's totally fair.
Jason, do you feel about the same?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great name to trade away. Sometimes when players haven't played in a while or they didn't have much run, they can feel younger than they are. Calvin Ridley's not a super young man. We don't know what his contract situation is going forward. This could be complete nothing the rest of his NFL career for fantasy. So getting something for him, especially if it's a rookie pick. If you can get a rookie pick, a second rounder, then you've got hope for the future. I don't think there is much of that, if any, with Calvin Ridley.
And you don't want to go back and listen to our episode after week 1 where I remember like he was the big conversation piece that we talked about, like his range of outcomes. And at the time, it felt like, okay, well, we need to see this a little bit longer, but it felt like, okay, wow, you have a locked in, receiver right now for your team that you didn't expect to be top 15 rest of the season. That's clearly not the case. And one of the things, Betz, you brought up is these advanced metrics that I've seen people post is that he's just getting bullied. Like he's not a big receiver. He's not very thick. He's kind of wiry. And he's just been getting bullied at the line of scrimmage where, if you're one of those smaller receivers, you can't just get open if people are pressing you. So it's a different system. It's a different team. It's a different role. And Christian Kirk seems to be the one. Let's take one more break and then we'll be right back.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's one of the NFL's best rivalries when the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Baltimore Ravens. Tune in early for pregame coverage with TNF Tonight, live from Baltimore. It's the Bengals and the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial and you can cancel at any time. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
You need a vehicle that can meet your family's needs, and Toyota has you covered. Introducing the first ever Grand Highlander, a midsize SUV with the ideal combination of space, performance, style, and advanced tech. The roomy Grand Highlander never makes you choose between passengers and cargo. You can fit both with ease. With 3 spacious rows and available seating for up to 8, and legroom that makes even long trips comfortable. With Grand Highlander's available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain unlimited and platinum trims, you can be confident you have the power, acceleration, and efficiency needed for almost any adventure your family can cook up. And you'll get where you're going in style with a modern, spacious cabin that's perfect for both playdates and date nights. Impressive tech upgrades take the new Grand Highlander to the next level, including a standard digital key, an available panoramic view mirror, and a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen. Don't just live life grander in the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander.
All right, we're back, and Jason's going to hit us with maybe the player people are most mad at in fantasy right now.
Yeah, I would say in some circles, yeah, you've got to be disappointed with the performance of Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is someone that has majorly disappointed for fantasy. However, if you have not been the Tony Pollard manager, I don't think you realize how bad it's been. You really don't. Because he got off to a hot start at the beginning of the year. The Cowboys are good. Tony Pollard seems like a young, explosive running back that, we've been waiting for the opportunity to come. He still carries a lot of value to people who have not had Tony Pollard. This is not, a lot of times when someone is performing the way he's performing right now, it's hard to trade him. You just can't. But I'm telling you, in your leagues, Tony Pollard's name is a valued, desired, wanted, young, athletic, stud running back. But I don't know that that's him, yo. I think this is – let me ask you guys a question, because Tony Pollard is now getting his opportunity, and he feels like this real young, exciting back. Would it surprise you to know that Tony Pollard is older than David Montgomery?
Yes.
He's been around for a while.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a reason he's on a franchise tag. It's because he was out of contract. This is his 5th season. It feels to some like, this is second or third year because, he was behind Zeke and explosive. We just wanted the opportunity, but that's not the situation. He doesn't have a contract for next year. We don't know what team he's playing for. If he keeps playing like this year, is he going to get a good opportunity for another team next year? No. That's where it's like, I think in a lot of leagues, you could trade Tony Pollard straight up for David Montgomery easily. I think plenty of leagues would take that. David Montgomery is literally younger, has a better team, is successful for fantasy, has a contract for the next 2 years. So, when I look at these two players comparatively, they shouldn't be valued near the same. But I think they're valued. I think Tony Pollard has more value to some people in a lot of leagues than David Montgomery does because of the excitement that has not come to fruition. And look, when you trade away Tony Pollard, you could say they're playing Carolina Panthers this week. That is a great matchup. They're playing the Washington Commanders the next week. That's another really good matchup. The Seattle Seahawks, another good matchup. You could feel really bad if Pollard comes out and has 3 good games after you trade him. But that's also what can help you get a lot for him to a team that needs a running back. But at the end of the year, I don't know that he gets a good contract anywhere. He's going to be a 27-year-old running back that even if he has a good 3 weeks with a good matchup, he disappointed his current NFL franchise. So I believe now's the time that you want to capitalize and get something for Pollard.
I agree. Before the season, he was seen as a top 10 dynasty running back. So in startup drafts, people were excited to take him second, third, whatever round but it's gone. Efficiency is not there right now. And, as part of it, you can say it's unlucky. But Jason mentioned, when you're at this age, turning 27 next year. He'll turn 27 April 30th. The list of contracts of running backs at this age, like the guaranteed money has not been there, for years. And then on top of that, it hasn't worked out. Let me give you some names, guys. Doug Martin, Chris Ivory, Latavius Murray, Dion Lewis, Carlos Hyde, Jamal Williams. I mean, it's like, these are the guys that are getting contracts, multi-year contracts at this age, and they were done with that year or the year after. So could he work somewhere next year? That's just a giant gamble. And during your discussion, guys, I realized that I had a trade in front of me last week that involved, I totally forgot. It was Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley were going to come my way. And I was going to have to give up a first, a second, and Jahan Dotson. And I said no, because I needed running back help, but I just said, I just don't think the price is right. So I guess I dodged a bullet.
I hope so.
Yeah. Tony Pollard's so interesting because like the explosiveness was his calling card. And I don't know if he's just like, it's just what happens when they hit the age cliff and kind of fall off, and he's not that old, but like it's not just the fact that Dak's throwing more. His just efficiency is terrible. So I'm worried about Tony Pollard moving forward.
All right, I've got one more name I want to give for a trade away, and Jason, feel free to rebuke me if you think I'm a little over the top, but it is Arizona Cardinals, Marquise Hollywood Brown. That I have him in a league, and I'm actively shopping him. So Jason, if you want him, you can have him because you have Kyler. But Kyler's back, and I think the sentiment is sweet. This is the duo. They've known each other since college. Hollywood's going to be locked in. Okay, and last week was not great. Whatever. But before that, you looked at their splits together, and you're like, sweet. Hollywood averaged 10 targets per game with Kyler since he's come to Arizona. That was only 8 games, so it's not a huge sample size. But we need to remember this is a different team. It is a different offensive coordinator than last year. It's a different system. They have a different setup. And my biggest argument for Hollywood is I think he's out of place in 2023. I think he's not built for today's NFL where every single team is running zone coverage at least 60% of the time. And 23 out of 32 teams are running it 70% of the time. So really, when I look at splits, a lot of times if we're grinding the tape, is somebody good against zone? That's all that matters to me. When somebody's really good against man coverage, it actually scares me a little bit because teams rarely run this. And this year, Hollywood and the year before has been very bad against zone coverage. In fact, he is very far behind Trey McBride and Michael Wilson in terms of yards per route run. Targets per route run, he's way behind Trey McBride when it comes to zone. His expected fantasy points, he's way behind. And all of his touchdowns this year have come against man coverage. Now that can work, but I think the type of player you have with Hollywood, teams are now running a bunch of too high safeties where they're saying, hey, you're not going to beat us deep. I think Patrick Mahomes kind of changed that for the league. And so Hollywood scares me because one, he's a free agent, right? Jason, like he's going to be a free agent.
He is.
We assume that he's going to re-sign because Kyler's his boy. That's not a foregone conclusion, but we also don't know. And what is he? Because I've used him in fantasy. The target totals have been there. The production hasn't. The yardage totals have not. And so I'm looking at a player that I just keep waiting and hoping that I'm going to get top 15, top 20 type numbers. And it's just never been the case. In fact, he's never finished inside the top 20 in his career. So I think he's okay to trade away.
Yeah, so the reason you're like saying rebuke me is because, I believe in Hollywood's talent. I also believe that he's going to be fantastic rest of this season for the Cardinals with Kyler in this new system with the new head coach. I mean, you talk about, okay, it's, we haven't seen Kyler with Hollywood in this system with this coach, but we have seen Hollywood in this system with this coach without Kyler. And prior to Kyler, you've got games with targets of 10, 10, 10, 11, 9, 8. Like, he's had a primary role in this offense. They just haven't been coming from Kyler. And, yeah, the first game with Kyler, only 4 targets. But, like you said, in the 8 games with Kyler prior to that, an average of 10 targets. So they're coming. he's the clear most talented receiver on the roster. So I'm not worried about that. I think rest of season, Hollywood is very good. So I'm fine trading for Hollywood, but you do have to have an expectation it could go poorly for him this offseason. We're in Arizona. I do not think it is a foregone conclusion that Hollywood will re-sign with the Cardinals at all. So, for instance, I was looking up wide receiver free agents this coming year. Mike Evans will be one. I think he'll re-sign with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Michael Pittman will be one. I definitely think he will be re-signed by the Colts. And then it's a bunch of jack squat with the exception of 2 players. There's T. Higgins, who will not re-sign with the Cincinnati Bengals. He'll be a free agent. He'll go get his money. And there's Hollywood Brown, who is, teams are thirsty for wide receivers. So we don't know where Hollywood's going to go next year, but he's not going to be the one. A team is not going to sign him to a deal to be their number 1 wide receiver. If he stays in Arizona, there is a really good chance that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go to the Arizona Cardinals next year, and therefore Hollywood will be the number 2. Now, we've seen plenty of number 2s be successful for fantasy. You could argue maybe that's a better role for Hollywood, being more of the Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle type. Really valuable for fantasy, but not the number 1 on their team. But the rest of this season, I think Hollywood will be very, very good.
I was going to say, I'm going to push back a little, Kyle, because I'm on the side of where Jason stands, where I see the argument for the offseason and the things that Jason just mentioned. But for this year, I mean, Kyler's going to continue to get better as he gets more acclimated to the system in real-life NFL games. And Hollywood's target share has been awesome this year. He's among the league leaders, though, in uncatchable target rate. Or I should say, like, his targets haven't been catchable from Josh Dobbs.
Betz,
so if you see that come back together,
real
yes,
quick? I would like you to stop.
Okay.
Because I think I'm going to try to trade for Kyler here after the show from Kyle. So let's, those started to sound really nice.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. Hollywood's going to be terrible this year. That's what I was going to say.
All right. I guess for the listeners, you can keep going with your spiel. But just earmuffs, Kyle.
The Josh Dobbs play in Arizona, while very fun, from a passing standpoint, was not great. Now, in Minnesota, he's the man, which has been so fun for fantasy. But his actual quarterback play that he has had this year, speaking of Hollywood, has not been good. And so if Kyler continues to play better and better and better as the year goes on, I just think if that volume is there, you'll see better box score production from Hollywood. So I'm still in if you need a piece to trade for this year, but I agree with the offseason concerns.
Would you give up a first, Jason?
Would I give up a first for Hollywood? Oh, that's really, really tough. I mean, obviously, in the league that we are in, that's the 12th pick.
Yeah, I would squeeze more out of you.
I don't know if I would.
For the stack?
Well, we got Joe Burrow, so I don't even know that Kyler is our weekly starter for the quote unquote stack. 26 years old. Oh man, I mean that's right around what the value is. Like a late first is probably about what it's going to cost you. You might, I think when it comes to Hollywood, picks won't do as well as players. Like when you're trying to, like, I don't really want to give up a pick for a wide receiver about to change teams where we don't know where he's going to go. But there might be players that make sense for both rosters, or like a second plus a player that, like a second and a downgrade at wide receiver going across to Hollywood. You get a pick, a future promise, and a Hollywood fill in, as like a flex level option. That seems to me like how you would try to trade for Hollywood.
Yeah. Is there a possibility that if he resigns, he's like the third option on this team next year?
Trey McBride, baby. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm just, like, so I did the deep dive just to say, like, Trey McBride is being targeted on 30% of his routes in zone coverage, which, like I said, 70% of the time, that's what you're getting. So there's a reason that this team is funneling targets there, and the NFL is funneling targets to these kind of players. They're not funneling them in the most efficient ways to downfield threats. Because I'm telling you, I am a Hollywood Brown manager, and you can look at target totals all day, expected fantasy points all day. Real fantasy points, it is not pretty right now.
Yeah.
And it could change. But anyway, yeah, Trey McBride. You have Trey McBride in that
got his
league.
hand
I do
so
have
far in the dirt.
Yeah, Mike and I drafted Trey McBride because we could not trade Travis Kelce. This is when McBride was coming out. We couldn't get enough for Kelce. We were trying to get, at the time, Kyle Pitts. We were trying to get Mark Andrews, trying to trade like Kelce plus stuff for them. Couldn't get it. So we were like, we have to find our long-term tight end replacement. All the young tight ends, no one is willing to give them up. And so we took Trey McBride so early. We took him at the 12 spot in the first round in that rookie draft, and we regretted it ever since. And now we're like, wait a minute, baby. Do we have our Kelce replacement of the future? I'm hopeful.
He's super fun. Betz and I basically will play him every single week in DFS from here on out. I feel like.
Yeah.
Just every single week.
He's been awesome.
All right, let's hit a couple of listener questions.
Mailbag.
All right, first question I have here, and we'll answer these pretty quickly on our Trade-apalooza, but is this the apex of Sam Howell's dynasty value? This one's from Jay Chillin. What do you guys think?
Probably. I think it probably is. Right now, he's the quarterback 3 on the season. He's top 10 in points per game. The team is saying all of the right things. They're talking about how he's the future. He's their franchise quarterback, and that's all well and good. But the team isn't that great, and if he doesn't win games, he will get replaced. The coach, the staff will get replaced. He doesn't have the draft capital to be bad for multiple years. So I think that there are people who might believe that he is the future, and they would be able to pay a little bit more. Sam Howell, to me, is going to get this year and next year. He'll play both seasons, and he'll be a streaming option both seasons. He's been on a heater right now, like 4 of the last 5 weeks, top 10. I don't think that is going to be very sticky. I see him more as like a 50% of games being a top 12 quarterback, which has a place as an important fantasy asset. Everybody in the world should know how much I love Sam Howell, how much I believe in him. But I also I think he's a legit quarterback who could be good long term. But I know what happens to quarterbacks to any position that does not have draft capital. They get replaced. They always do.
Yeah. I think if you have him, be thankful if he's your backup or in a super flex league. I would not try to trade for him. The stat we always bring up is almost a third of the league changes over their starting quarterback year to year. So not a guarantee for next year or the year beyond, but just be happy. I think he's one of those players that this might be the apex and you just ride it out. Next one, trade question here. Send Nico Collins in a late first and second for Amon-Ra. Betz, what do you think about that value?
I would definitely try to get Amon-Ra in this deal. I think Nico Collins has had a very nice year, nice little breakout here. But anytime you can get a top 10 dynasty wide receiver for an unknown rookie pick and a player who probably will settle in as like a fringe wide receiver 2/3 in fantasy for the next couple of years, I'm doing that every day.
Yeah, Collins was almost a name that I brought up as a trade away, and I felt like I couldn't with the way that Stroud's playing, but Collins has had 3 good games this year. He's had maybe 5 good games in his entire career. So he's a player that like next year he'll be in a contract year. I don't feel like he's like a must, like dynasty cornerstone piece. He's fine, but I feel like he's more flex value than a wide receiver 2 moving forward. Next one from the real Jeff. What do I do with Cooper Kupp right now?
You hope Matthew Stafford is healthy.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you do. You
and
hold on to him.
You pray that Carson Wentz doesn't have to play football.
Yeah, hopefully you're a championship caliber team. And what you do is you hope that he can take you to a championship. I mean, if Stafford is healthy, Cooper Kupp could be great the rest of the season, could be a league winner. you're not going to get enough for him trading him away right now with his injuries, with his injury to Matthew Stafford, with the performance he's had, with Puka. So you just have to hold and play him. I think if you are a rebuilding team and you want to, get something out of him, then you go look at your best teams in the league and, you try to get as much as you can for him to give someone a, championship help.
This is a question we've gotten before, but I think it's worth repeating at this time of the year. From Nico on Discord, is there a way trade calculators and trade value charts can be a valuable resource? And I'll throw this in first. Trade value and calculators assume that the value they're assigning a player is correct when we know, if you would have signed a value for Tony Pollard before the year, you would have looked at that and say, oh, well, Tony Pollard's really, X number valuable. And it's just assuming a lot that we know a lot when we know over time things changed. I think it's valuable if it's the fourth or fifth thing you're using in a conversation as kind of like a, you're checking your work kind of thing. But we personally don't, I never see us talk about them or see them in our Slack.
I can't imagine trusting any kind of trade calculator. Just impossible. The way that those things are updated, the lagging values, it's the only way that it's valuable is if you can use it to prove to someone else what a good deal they're getting because the values say it's a good deal. I would hope that everybody making trades, listening to this show, having fun with Dynasty, that they have their own values on players, that they go, this is what I think of this player. You don't need to trust a number behind the scenes that someone else is assigning to someone. I've never been a huge fan of them. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's great trade calculators out there, but I've seen the wackiest things from those trade calculators.
I think they're the worst. They're the worst because you will have people in your league who are just, they're only going to make a trade if the calculator says they are getting the right side of the deal, which is so dumb, right? It prevents trading. It prevents your league from being active sometimes. So I think they're terrible. For Dynasty, I do not use them, and I think that people that rely too much on them, you might be missing out on some good deals that come your way if you're too stuck to what the computer says.
All right, last question here from Eucalyptus Richard on Twitter. If you have Garrett Wilson and Drake London and you want to tier up at wide receiver because you want to win right now, which wide receiver would you trade for and what would the deal look like? So I took this question as if I had those two players, it feels like almost a lost season, like where you're going to get a lot of targets. Garrett Wilson's going to average like 12 targets a game, but it doesn't feel like you're getting over the hump. So would you trade Garrett Wilson for another player that's in a similar tier but is a little bit older? Like that's the dance that you're doing right now. So like, would you trade Garrett Wilson for Tyreek?
Oh yeah, for sure I would. For sure.
What about
in Dynasty? I would if I could trade Garrett Wilson and receive Tyreek Hill, I would do that in a heartbeat.
I think a lot of people, and I've seen this in our Discord, are afraid because they look at the younger player and they go, I'm supposed to like the younger player more. But if you're in win now, you might be waiting forever. Like, we don't know if Garrett Wilson's ever going to have a quarterback. Or definitely Drake London. That dude will never get a quarterback if he's an Atlanta Falcon. So I think it's fine. Like, throw out the youth and ask yourself, can I win this year and win next year? That's how I took this question.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I think the interesting name here, because to me, Tyreek Hill is a world beater. He is so unbelievably dominant. He should have this season and 2 more years left, I believe, on his contract. And he's talked about he's going to retire. I think he'll be great next year. I think he'll be great the year after that. And then I think he's going to walk away. And I'll take 3 years of greatness. He's not good. He's not being okay for fantasy. Like he's breaking fantasy for a lot of fantasy managers. So, yeah, I would take that. But the name that I'm less confident in, there's a lot more tumult going on within the franchise. Obviously, he's still great. But would you trade away Garrett Wilson for Stephon Diggs?
I was about to bring him up as a Stephon Diggs manager. If I'm in win now, then I'm just going to write it out with Diggs. But I think I would. I think that makes sense when you think you add in the risk, the age. Also, if Diggs just said tomorrow, I don't want to play football, I think we factored that in a little bit. Betz, how do you feel?
That one's scary. I think I can see the argument because Diggs has been awesome ever since he got to Buffalo. He's been elite for fantasy. I think I still lean the Garrett Wilson side, even factoring in that Diggs is probably the better win now piece. But just if that happens and next year Diggs is not part of Buffalo or just whatever is happening, and Garrett Wilson ascends to be this just incredible asset in Dynasty, I wouldn't sleep at night. So I would hold Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, me too. For the record, I'm on the Garrett Wilson side there.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Dynasty Podcast. Next week, just a little tease, a pro tease here. We have a very, very special episode, a Dynasty Film Festival episode, which I'm pretty excited about it. Go to jointhefoot.com if you want to be a part of us, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.
It's football season, and now you can get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.